Welcome to the Jericho Force podcast, where we learn how to integrate faith into the work that we do. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. Here's our host, my husband, author, speaker, teacher, encourager, and stewardship coach, Jason Davis.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are back for another episode of the Jericho Force podcast. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify, and I am really excited to have this episode because this individual, our guest today, she is no stranger. In fact, she is the first, and I repeat, the first returning guest on the Jericho Force podcast. You all can't see as she's laughing at me currently as I do this introduction. You can't see.
First returning ever.
First returning ever. But Juli Wenger, she's above all else one of my favorite people, but an author, a speaker, a coach, person of impact. She sings. We will get into that. We will get into that. But ladies and gentlemen, Juli Wenger, back on the Jericho Force podcast. Juli, how are you doing, my sister?
I'm excited. We're going to have fun. We always do.
We do.
We have no idea where this is going to go, but we'll just follow it because that's how we roll. So
that is how we roll.
Let's shake some people's trees.
Yes, tree shaking. So Juli, you're back as a returning guest. A lot has happened since the last time you were on the show. Give us some updates. This is kind of new territory, everybody, with her being back for a second time, so she kind of gets to give us a timeline of what's occurred. So Juli, what's new?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book, which was a massive undertaking, and it was something that I was just thinking about last time I was on the show. So there's been this really cool journey of God saying, drop everything and go write my book. And me saying, really? And then stepping into that and cranking that thing out. I started it last year, like 2 weeks ago last year, which is mind-boggling to me. And it dropped in July. And we've had kids start new grades into kindergarten, and the business has been shifting from, I'd say, more of a secular focus to more of a guide my people and equip and empower my people so they can go out and they can live out their calling kind of a focus, which has been really exciting. And I'm just seeing so much of his provision and his direction and the ways that God, his plan is so multifaceted all the time, right? There's all of these different parallels and things that you just don't anticipate. And the way that he's been connecting people and opportunities and challenging me and stripping stuff off and working on my character and my perseverance and all of that, it's been a whirlwind of a year and a bit, frankly. It's one of those, how has it actually been that long? But it also feels like it's been about 6 years since we recorded our last episode, just, transparently. So
folks, those are more dog years that Juli's referring to. But Juli, you said a few things that's interesting. Number one, congratulations on the book. Yes, people behind the scenes, I did know it was coming. I could not tell you it was coming, but I did know. But I know the work you put into the book, Juli. So we'll talk about the book, but you said something really key about how God was shifting who you were serving. We always hear the term pivot in business. What has that been like? Because a lot of business owners especially coming out of the pandemic into, we've heard, a new normal. But what has that been like for you as God has shifted your focus?
It has been extremely challenging, and it has been unnerving, and it has been exciting. So it's been challenging because there is this commitment to a pre-existing way of being. There's been these patterns in my life, these themes of, and this is a lot of what we talk about in the book, living into other people's expectations of what success is, of what being liked or affirmed or needed or approved of looks like. And there's a lot of context there of coming out of a real estate industry experience and career. You don't talk about God. You just don't go there. So despite being a Christian for literally all my life that I can remember, there was this mutedness to the faith aspect of my life from a more public forum, like less of an overt claiming of Jesus. And shifting that narrative, because one of the things he's been very, very clear with me over and over and over again about is, I need you to be bolder for me. So there's this tension of, if I do that, what does that mean for being accepted, being liked, the success or failure of my business? What are my existing clients that are not in the faith space going to do? How are they going to react? And just really wrestling with, what does that mean in terms of my relationships and my ability to be loved? What does that mean in terms of social rejection? And this theme of social rejection has been really interesting, even over the last couple of months, because I've been building out this course we're calling the Fear to Freedom Playbook. And so I went looking for definitions of fear. And in Brene Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart, which I have not read all of, but I got it because I love her, I flipped through and I found a definition of fear. And she talked about how fear for us, it fires both on a psychological and physical level, like in the same place of our brain. So we will respond to fear triggers the same, whether it's, I like to use this example, a bear jumping out from behind the next minivan, or someone potentially is going to reject us. And social rejection, in her searching through research about fear, is the most common and deeply rooted fear, psychology-wise, that there is. And there's been a bit of a freedom in that, of saying, okay, this is normal, for one thing, in terms of just how are we psychologically wired. And if my fear and my tension about him shifting who I serve, about him shifting how I show up, frankly, is rooted in this fear of social rejection, how do I counter that from a perspective of understanding that ultimately I need to be looking to my creator for my affirmation of my value, and not to his creation, which is imperfect and flawed. And there's been this journey of just continually choosing and circling back to and rewiring neural pathways and creating new habits and patterns that is allowing, it's still a process, but allowing me to show up more and more authentically and more boldly for him. And it's also been challenging because of comparison, right? So I'll even look at, and this is interesting for me, I'll look at other Christian entrepreneurs, because one of the things that he's been actively doing is shifting my network. And that's meant I have a lot more exposure and a lot more interaction with other people of faith, other people who are, we call them kingdompreneurs sometimes, right? People who are building the kingdom, but there is sometimes this perceived ease that I see in other people's business, where they'll talk about faith and they'll talk about God, but their business is not like Jesus at the center of the messaging, the branding, the focus, and that feels like, oh, that'd just be so much easier to build something that's successful, whatever that means, than having this call to be bolder, having this call to talk about him more, having this call to challenge him more, having this call to specifically begin to shift the focus to empower my people to go then bring the other people home. And I want the easy, because that's what we often want, right? We want what's easier. We want what's comfortable. And he's like, no, that's not what I built you for. That's not the path I built for you. That's not where we're going. I have this specific plan where you are going to get over this fear of rejection and placing all of your validation and your worth in other people's perspectives, perceptions, opinions, what you think they think of you, and you're going to place it in me, and I need you to be a leader in that. So that the exciting part of that is that when I actively choose to trust him, when I actively say, okay, you know what, like, yeah, this is yours. I know you have a plan that's better than mine. I've learned that the hard way a number of times. I'm just going to go with it, and I'm going to trust you. The opportunities that he gives me, the connections that I get to make, the conversations I get to have, there is nothing like it. There is nothing like being able to show up and provide insight, or have him just drop something that I then get to share with people and watch the light bulbs come on. And it's fulfilling, and it's rewarding, and it's just so cool to see him work, like right now, not big picture, not hindsight, but see him work in the moment, in the present, moving people, and be able to acknowledge that with them too. Not that passive, he's working through you, but you're not really talking to them about it because they're not there. Like, we get to, okay, I'm hearing something right now, and it is not me. And here's what he's telling me. And then have them be able to internalize that and accept that. Those environments, those conversations are just like nothing else I've experienced. So that's kind of the three, or the, couple of aspects of that.
That's really good, Julie. I always appreciate your transparency, because when people go through pivots or a change of focus, to your point, we're always looking for the formula. Well, 10 steps to switch your focus or change your perspective, or, 5 ways to handle when you change your niche. Like, we're always looking for that. But in my experience, and I believe in others, if everyone was honest, not that there aren't certain principles or guiding factors, we all have to walk through it on our own. So it's refreshing to hear your take on what God specifically is doing in your life, and how he's shifting you, and the things, quite frankly, that you're battling in that process, and that it's not this perfect set in stone thing. And I love what you said, when you actively choose to trust God. And that's kind of where I wanted to go next, before we dive into the goodies of getting fired up, fulfilled, and free. For you, Julie, what does it mean to actively trust God, and what do you find? You started to get into this a little bit. You mentioned comparison, but what does it mean for you to actively trust God, and kind of go under the hood a little bit? What do you find most often kind of getting in the way of that, based on what's going on in your life?
Yeah, the act of trusting, I think this is the hardest part for me, because there's this lie of control that the enemy feeds us and that the world feeds us, right? You can plan your way through, you can control the details, you can find a 10-step process, you can leapfrog all the challenges, you can just, plan and push your way to success. And I like control, and I like to know the plan, and I like to be able to just go and execute and do, but I get stuck then in the performance and the trying to control the outcomes, and then I burn out. And so actively trusting him it's a practice, right? It's become this practice that I'm still working on my consistency in, of taking the time to to check in with him, of taking the time to have business meetings with God at the beginning of my day, taking the time at the end of my day to just recap and be still and give what I need to give to him. And it's just a choosing. There's this continual choosing to say, okay, today I'm going to operate from a posture of surrender. Today I'm going to choose to trust you because I know that your plan is better than mine. Today I'm going to root into the word and I'm going to see what you flag for me. Today I'm going to lean into the people around me, that especially those that are my faith people or my front line, I try to call them, these people that I'm traveling with that help keep me centered on him. And there's a collection of practices that are like triggers that bring me back to, okay, where am I putting my focus? Where is it that I am starting my day thinking about? What is it I'm starting my day thinking about that then creates a bit of a trajectory around the rest of my day, or that creates guardrails around the rest of my day? I've got this little sticky note that's on the wall behind my computer screen, and it just says eyes on me. And I've got another one below it that talks about perseverance, right? James 1:4. And those little anchors and the practices like spending time with him first thing in the day, all of those little bits and pieces, or playing worship music in the background, or, who am I talking to? Who am I spending time with? All of those work together to remind me, as I get into more of a habitual pattern of saying, okay, I'm here. Here we go. What are you going to do with me today? How are you going to use me today? I'm going to do my best to be available to it. I'm going to do my best to surrender to it. I'm going to do my best to show up where you want me to show up. In terms of derailing, the things that get in the way, it's actually funny that we're talking about that specifically, because I started this like seminary this year. I never saw this coming. Okay. This was like random in my mind. It's obviously not to him, but we were having a conversation about specifically that. And we were talking about the temptations of Jesus in the wilderness. And our pastor was teaching about it. And he talked about the temptation to be relevant, the temptation to be spectacular, and the temptation to be powerful. And framing those in terms of the, show me, prove who you are, like, I'll give you all of this if you'll just, all of those different things. And I was sitting there and I'm listening to like, okay, yeah, I want to be relevant. I want people to see me as, this is the perception management. I want them to see me as successful. I want them to see me as someone they can look up to. And that's my ego and my pride, right? So that gets in the way. But then he started talking about this need to be spectacular. And I'm sitting at the front of the class and like, he looks at me when he goes to start asking for feedback, and I just like, I totally did that like grunting laugh, like, and he just gives me this look, and he's about my age, right? Also an author. We have a lot in common in terms of the content of some of what we've written about and experienced. And he's like, and I was like, I'm just going to crawl under the table right now, because I have had this pattern my whole life of I need to be special. I need to not just be good at what I do. I need to be spectacular. I need to not just be a good singer when I'm leading worship. I need to be phenomenal, like step aside Carrie Joby kind of phenomenal, right? And like, she sings for a living. This is not a bar that I can be holding myself to at this point in my life. And so there's just that theme of how I go about trying to prove that I am special and prove that I am worthy and prove that I can be looked up to. And like, it's all rooted in insecurity, right? It's all rooted in that looking for my value outside of myself, but not in him. And everything I think flows out of that takes me out is like, but I need to be like up here. I need to be in that top echelon of people and of performance and of doing and achieving and next. And the challenge there is it's not sustainable. It points the glory all in the wrong place. It doesn't give God the credit for anything. And we always end up in comparison land where someone else is achieving more. Someone else's business is doing more. Someone else's book is selling more. Someone else is recording albums and I'm not. Someone else is raising children who seem more well-balanced. Someone else has a stronger marriage relationship. Someone else, like, there's always someone else doing something better or what we perceive to be better. You can't win.
Yeah.
And that not winning then turns into this spiral of self-judgment or negative self-talk or shame. And that creates a foothold for the enemy to crop in and be like, ooh, I'm gonna just exacerbate some of these lies so that I can take her out of her power, so that I can take her out of alignment, so I can pull her off her path, and she can't go and create that impact that she's been built to create. And so that she's not actively choosing because she's so distracted to trust God today. And I read something last week about how those of us who are always trying to prove and achieve and do more, and reaching for all of these standards and comparing all the time, there's fundamentally this lack of trust in the sufficiency of God. And I had to really sit with that because there's this whole section that expanded on that. And it was just, that's me when I am not in that actively choosing to trust, actively choosing to be in relationship space. Is, do I really trust that he's going to provide? Do I really trust that he wants to do something better in me? Do I really trust that I'm enough for him to do that anyway? And that, I think that's the tension. And that's the polarity of either I am pulling and focusing my attention on him, like eyes on me, right? Or I'm drifting into the other end of the spectrum where it's this spiral of, why would he want to use me? Why would he want to achieve things through me? Why would he want to? And then you start to question all of the things and see all of the ways you're not spectacular. Even though he sees me as spectacular, that should be enough, right? But it's like, the world gets so loud. And unless we're very intentional about creating those quiet spaces and that rest and that time with him where we can actually hear him and we stop long enough to listen, there is not that input from him. There's just the noisy input from the world.
As I hear you talking very openly about your experience, Juli, I think, thank God for relationship, because without Jesus, how would we know where we're at on that spectrum, right? The Holy Spirit can say, hey, Juli, I love you. Like what I did, I've already taken care of everything, so you don't have to look for yourself. Or Jason, you don't have to look for yourself in these other measures of earthly success. It's like, hey, I created the earth. I know how the earth works. I know how you work. I know the number of hairs on your head. I knew you before you were in your mother's womb, and how awesome it is to be able to serve a God who can come alongside us and say, it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hit my revenue target. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, but I
don't need you to do any of that for me to love you.
Right.
Like, it's that whole concept, and this has really sat with me lately, that Jesus didn't perform a whole bunch of miracles before, he gets baptized and God says, this is my son with whom I'm well pleased and whom I love. It's like, hey, this is my boy. And I love him because he's my boy, and that's it.
Yep.
And that extends to us, right? I love you, Juli. I love you, Jason, just because you are mine, and that's it. And I don't need you to do anything to earn that. And I don't need you to do anything, just period. I love you because you're mine and I want to hang out with you and spend time with you. Plus, I want to give you fulfillment and I want to co-create with you and give you purpose. So I've created this thing for you to go do. I've created this thing for me to walk alongside you that will matter and that will build the kingdom and that will bring my other people home. Like, he can do that without us, but he chooses to do it with us.
Yeah. What a beautiful sight that is, to be able to co-labor and partner with God. And speaking of, Juli, because you're so good at segues, speaking of partnering with, you partnered with the Lord. We've been alluding to it the whole time, so folks, let's get to it. Juli's new book. It's been, a little bit over a couple of months, so still fresh. And we're going to, make sure you're going to want to get your copy. So Juli wrote a book called Fired Up, Fulfilled, and Free. Know who you are, get out of your own way, live your purpose. Juli, as the people in the street would say, give us the deets.
Yeah. This book, when I sit down and read parts of it, I'm like, what? Because he showed up so powerfully in the process, and it literally was like he's using my hands, but it's his book. And the key behind doing it, the point to doing it, was that he had brought me through this process out of burnout and overwhelm and success chasing and doing everything the way I thought everyone else wanted me to do it, right? I bought someone else's story for my life and I went after it fully. And it led me to a point of having quote unquote success by the world's standards. But I was miserable and I was tired and I was burnt out and I was not present with my family. And I just felt like I was failing everywhere. And I was like, this is not what I want. It's what I'm supposed to want, but it's not what I want. And so I came to this point of saying, all right, what's your plan? Because clearly mine's not working. And I realized in him processing me that I didn't know who I was. I'd lost my identity to being everything to everybody else and making everyone else happy. And so we went through this season of rediscovering my identity. How do I reflect him? How is he reflected in and through me? And then getting clarity on purpose. What is it I'm supposed to do with my life? What did you build me for? What is it that's going to build me and build other people and create fulfillment in me, and that I'm going to be excited to wake up and do, and that matters, and that allows me to live a life that is aligned with, what God wants me to live. And so there's this context of I am love, joy, strength, light, and grace, right? Because our identity is not a role, it's not a title, it's not an assignment, it's not mom, it's not former real estate agent, it's not coach, it's not author. Like, none of those things are who I am. They're things I give my time and energy to or have, but they're not my identity. And then with purpose, it's kind of shifted in terms of its expression over the years. And right now I'm kind of in this space of equipping people, empowering people, and giving them and providing spaces where they can encounter God so that we can go out together and we can bring his people home, right? So we can abandon fear and we can embrace hope and embrace courage. And there's this whole new kind of verbiage around it, but it was go empower people, go help them live their purpose out. And I looked at that and I was like, oh, I can't really do that selling houses. So then he led me through this process of transition. And in the process of transition, there was a lot of this, I call it getting out of my own way, that we talk about in the book, where I had to really understand, how am I taking myself out? And what are the patterns and what are the habits and what are the beliefs that are keeping me from actually stepping to and into what it is that he's built me for and is calling me to. Because we all have these fear responses. Everything's underpinned by fear. It's like one end of the spectrum, fear, the other end, freedom. And we have to move our way through the fear to get to the freedom. And I don't talk about freedom like, oh, we're just like rich and we live in an island in Hawaii that we own on our own, right? Like that's not the goal, but right. There's freedom in the following, essentially. There's freedom in being authentic. There's freedom in really learning to trust him. And there's freedom in being able to take courage. We don't have to manufacture that stuff. And so this whole thing, as I shifted and went through transition out of real estate abruptly, like buy $500,000 a year business, just like boom, and into coaching and speaking and empowering people and all of the transitions therein, right? Of like, I'm a real estate coach into identity and purpose, and now into more of this faith-based side. It's created this process. And the process has been something that I've seen absolutely transform by his power. Okay, like this is not a Juli's amazing thing, but by his power, this process is transforming people's lives. And he said, you need to reach more people with this. There are more people that need this message, that need this process, that need the permission slip, that authenticity is, and you can't one-on-one coach them all. So let's cast a wider net. Let's write this book. Let's get this process in front of people. And essentially, to kind of bullet point it, we're walking through fear. We're walking through this journey of I'm not enough into reclaiming our enoughness. We're dealing with but am I too much? And then how do we embrace those too much traits and those characteristics? Because I really believe, and he's shown me how he's built us with so many of the things that we think are too much for other people. And those are the things that we need to actually be able to execute on our calling. But it's how do we do that from a wisdom-informed and healthy place? And then we get into identity and defining that, and purpose and defining that, and stopping living everybody else's story for your life. And I've seen this even over the last number of weeks in conversations with people. There's so many people who just say, well, I just defaulted into what mom and dad wanted me to do, or I chased whatever I thought the most popular career was going to be, or there's this box that someone else built that was never meant for them, but they're living in it. And so we need to wake people up, but we need to give them a roadmap. How do you step out of it? And how do you get that clarity on who you are and why you're here? What is it he's built you for? What is the purpose? And again, it's not a job title, right? The purpose is not, I'm going to go be a coach. The purpose is I'm going to empower people and I'm going to equip people. And that's like whole life. That's not just, oh, well, in this career box, I'm going to do that. The purpose piece is branching across or umbrella, over top of your entire life. And then we get to evaluate, well, what do I give my time and energy to? And how do I do that in a way that best uses my gifts and my abilities and my personality structure and my natural talents and all of those things? And it's funny because there's this long list of process, right? But that stuff's the fast stuff. That's just the foundation. And then we get to actually go and step into it. And then we get to live it out. And it's in the living it out that we reach this space. And it's continual, like most things, of living fired up, fulfilled, and free, right? Where it's like, we are ready for battle. We're excited. We're like geared up and we're good to go. And we are fulfilled because we're doing the thing that we're meant to do. And there's a freedom in that. And there is a freedom in letting go of this need for control that we don't actually have. It's like that Elizabeth Gilbert quote of, you never had control, all you had was anxiety. But we delude ourselves into thinking we can control all things, right? And so there's this process that follows who am I, why am I here, of now we need to actively get out of our own way. And what does that look like? And what are the key components? And what are the challenges that we face, like imposter syndrome and comparison? And how do we shift the people we're with? Because this is vitally important. So we dive into all of those pieces, but within a tangible framework that you can work your way through and step through, and then come out of the other side of, in a space of hopefully being able to answer this "do you trust me" question that God asks us with yes. Because often we start this process and we're like, well, I'd like to.
Yeah.
Right. But do I? Like, do I actually? And the goal is to get us to a place of being able to boldly stand in that faith and say yes. and being able to be authentic and being able to be courageous, and just day by day, right? I mean, mercy is new every day. My grace is sufficient. Like there's this, and even picking up our cross daily, right? Like there's so much that thematically it's day by day. It's not, I reach a point and then I'm done. It's just this journey with walking beside Jesus and saying, okay, like, let's go. What do you got for me today? Let's go. What do you got for me today? And it's just such a fun space to be in of, all right, what's next? And people ask me all the time, like, what's coming? What are you doing next? What's your 5-year plan? I'm like, I don't know. Because he's not telling me to build one of those. So I'm not doing it. Because I like control, and I'll step back into what I'll call you later faith. So yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Juli Wenger, author of Fired Up, Fulfilled, and Free. Juli, just hearing you recount the journey and the process, even as somebody who got to read the manuscript, which thank you so much. I know you didn't have to do that, but it's so awesome to see the outcome of where things are today, and knowing what you've been through and then the impact that God is allowing you to make. It's a beautiful thing. So folks, if you're listening, as you're hearing Juli talk about the process that she stepped through and giving just some guidelines on what does it look like to actually get in, go under the hood, and go through the process. I don't know about you, I would be ordering the book now. So Juli, where can people get a copy of the book and start digging into this journey?
Yeah, you can hop onto Amazon and grab it from various country Amazons, wherever you're tuning in from. We also have links out to it on my website. So if you head over to juliwenger.com, you can find links there as well. And we're keeping it pretty simple. I'm hoping we'll have the audiobook soon, but that's all a God's timing thing. Again, I have no idea when he's gonna be like, and go. So, stay tuned. But for now, go to Amazon, grab a copy, get one for a friend, and let me know what you think.
Yes.
I like it when people hop in my DMs and give us feedback. So
yes, make sure you leave a review for Juli. That's what allows the books to get even more visibility, so she can cast a wider net. And trust me, it won't just be, hey, give her a positive review just because. I believe if you read this, as somebody who has read it, I believe you'll be blessed for sure. So Juli, we gave this journey, we time traveled, we did a little Back to the Future action. Here's everything that happened with Juli leading up to now. We're going to go a little bit in the future, because it's like, Jason, I just wrote the book and I'm doing all these things and I have a master class, but what's coming up for you, Juli, that you're most excited about? At the time of us speaking, we're in the fourth quarter of 2022. Some people are kind of getting into, we kind of wind down in the holidays, but for you, what's next, and what do you believe God is calling you into as we end the 2022 year?
Yeah, the big assignment for me right now is continuing to build out the course that is, I'd say, in large part based on the book. We're taking themes from the book and we're adding in a lot of additional pieces, both that didn't make it into the book and things that God's been guiding me through and teaching me about since. And so it's phenomenal. It's going to be a life changer. And it is also, I would dare say, as much work as writing the book was, which I did not anticipate. So in terms of timeline of when the Fear to Freedom playbook is going to be ready, I'm not sure. And that's the key focus for me for the remainder of the year, is to complete the content creation and the mapping out of it, because the intention is to create a space where people can journey together in community, because we're meant to travel together, right? I love the concept in Ephesians 4 of you were meant to travel together on the same road, so stay together both inwardly and outwardly. That's in the Message translation. And there is this necessity for actively moving forward in our faith and on our paths and on our journeys, but in community. And from running group programs before, I see the power of having people invested in their own growth in the same space, in the same direction. And it exponentially creates this momentum and this shift and this transformation. So we're looking at how do we create this cohort or community experience and also integrate real spaces of reflection and growth and doing the work and being supported in that beyond what reading a book can offer. And it's interesting when you look at things like learning styles, right? Because some people will read a book and they'll get what they need and they'll go act on it and they'll move. And some people need a more accountability or focused or more activities, more integration opportunities for content. And then some people really need that one-to-one deep dive. So we're creating spaces that provide for all of those variations within the business or the ministry, that I call a business. And it's going to be breath work, and it's going to be prayer, and it's going to be teaching, and just really leveraging some of the different giftings and stuff that I have. And I'm working on a playlist that's going to accompany it, because that's my other passion, is singing and worship. And he hasn't quite illuminated to me how that's going to be fleshed out yet, but there's some really interesting things that I think he's going to create with this. So if people want to get on the wait list, they can hop over to the website, they can add themselves to the wait list, and then you'll find out first when it's ready to go.
Love it, Juli. Creating places, spaces for beautiful faces. I love it. Well, Juli, as you know, one of my favorite people, my Canadian sister, just north of me, north of the border. I always appreciate our conversations, and I know that the Holy Spirit is walking with you daily. I'm very excited for you and what the book is going to do, and also very proud because I got to see how the sausage was being made. And so I just want to say I appreciate you, love you, God loves you more, and that it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to watch.
It's going to be fun to travel. And I mean, you know this, but I'm so grateful for your encouragement and pushing me along the way. Because honestly, like, for anyone listening, having people who can call you up and can remind you of how God sees you, frankly, when you're hitting your stuff, because this kind of a growth curve will always bring up our stuff. There's a necessity, and that's part of why community is so important. So you've been an important part of my front line, and I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely, I'll be here. Well, Juli, thank you for coming back for round 2, you guys. Round 2.
Yeah.
First returning. Yes, she will have that designation as the first. There will be many others to come, but Juli certainly is the first. Just shout out to you coming back to share with us what God has been doing since our last conversation, and as well as spreading the great message about your new book. So thank you for hanging out with us here for a second time on the Jericho Force podcast.
It's been an honor.
Well, folks, you know how we leave things. We just don't end it. We like our remix on Romans 12:2. Don't conform to the world's way of doing business. Transform by doing business God's way. We'll see you next time on the Jericho Force podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Jericho Force podcast. You can catch us live on Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time and on demand. Check out jerichoforce.com/podcast for more details. To learn how to live out your faith in the marketplace, grab a copy of Jason Davis's book, Fortify, Being Rooted in God's Plan for Work and Business, available on Amazon.
You're listening to Julius Worldwide Podcast.